For the first time since 1904, golf returned to the Olympic Games in Rio 2016. We're pulling back the curtain, showing you what it takes to accomplish such a monumental task. A team effort, countless hours, and a love for the game. This is Changemakers. Neatly tucked away in the corner of Ty Votal's office, golf clubs, not for play. They serve as a reminder.
These don't get touched.
These don't get touched.
Okay.
These belong to an LPGA player named Louise Suggs.
A founder of the LPGA Tour, Louise Suggs' love for the game birthed generations of professional golfers.
I was very close to Louise, and when she passed, she asked that I have those clubs.
Prior to joining the PGA Tour, Votal served as commissioner of the LPGA. His Ponte Vedra office is consumed with astonishing stories. Now retired, he has time to share a few.
That's the first tee of the first day of the Olympic golf competition.
The actual tee used in the 2016 Summer Olympic Games in Rio.
This is a photo of Justin Rose, his chip on 18th green on the final day of the Olympic golf competition.
Golf's first time returning to the Olympics in 112 years.
Ty, what does it say here?
It says, to Ty, thanks for all your help and hard work in championing golf's return to the Olympics, Justin Rose.
He had a hand in it, bidding, building, lobbying.
All the organizations that are leaders in golf, all the acronyms of LPGA and PGA Tour and USGA and RNA, European Tour, et cetera, they all came together to say this is right for our sport, and I was just fortunate enough to be a part of it.
I want an honest moment here, Ty, honest answer. Your initial response when you were tasked with this, bringing golf back to the Olympics, honestly, what was your response?
Well, fear of failure has always driven me, and so the fact that we could lose the vote was something that drove me forward and only wanted me to work that much harder to get a successful outcome.
For 18 months, he traveled the globe meeting with International Olympic Committee members, some of them royalty, to convince the world that golf, in fact, had a place, belonged in the Olympics.
Was there a point where you were nervous about all of this? Like, oh my gosh, is this really going to happen?
Every day. Would the top players play? We had to convince the top players, if you were an Olympic athlete, if you were named to be on the team, will you in fact play? Because golf we're fortunate to have a number of tentpole events around the year.
4 major championships, the Ryder Cup, President's Cup, the Players' Championship, to name a few.
So to add one more event into the golf's calendar, there were some people who were saying, is that really something we need in our sport?
It appears so.
I'm very pleased to be able to announce that we just received word from the IOC.
On October 9th of 2009, the IOC said yes. But the site of the 2016 Games, Rio, did not have a golf course that was up to par.
So we had to build a golf course. We made at least 12 visits from 2010 to 2016 on just the golf course preparations alone. And today, that golf course still exists. It's a public golf course, the only public golf course in the country of Brazil.
He calls it a satisfying accomplishment, right up there with growing the game, exposing the discipline to a wider range of future athletes.
What are your hopes for the future of this sport that you love?
To bring it to as many people as you can possibly bring it to.
Luis would be proud.
Well, I was very fortunate to have the leadership of the PGA Tour at the time, Tim Finchem, the commissioner of the PGA Tour, ask me to take a lead role in helping get the bid process to fruition and to success to get golf into the Olympics. And it started in March of 2008, worked 18 months with a number of people inside the golf industry to have the vote in Copenhagen in October of 2009 be a successful vote, and it was, with golf and rugby sevens getting in. But it was 18 months of working with a lot of people inside the golf industry to have them coalesce around the idea of golf in the Olympics, and then to convince people outside the golf industry that golf would be good for the Olympics and that the Olympics would be good for golf. And those were, dozens and dozens and dozens of conversations in various places around the world, which was a fascinating process to be a part of.
I want an honest moment here, Ty, honest answer. Your initial response when you were tasked with this, bringing golf back to the Olympics, honestly, what was your response?
Well, fear of failure has always driven me, and so the fact that we could lose the vote was something that drove me forward and only wanted me to work that much harder to get a successful outcome. And again, it wouldn't have happened without a lot of different people coming together. The level of consensus inside the golf industry itself to get golf in the Olympics was something that I have not seen in any other issue in our sport. There were some naysayers, mostly in the media, about whether golf would be appropriate for the Olympics and whether the Olympics would be appropriate for golf. But at the end of the day, all the leadership all the organizations that are leaders in golf, all the acronyms of LPGA and PGA Tour and USGA and RNA, European Tour, et cetera, they all came together to say this is right for our sport, and I was just fortunate enough to be a part of it.
Ty, what went through your mind when you were told, hey, we need you to get golf back into the Olympics? What went through your mind?
Well, we had to overcome a number of different things, both with respect to how some IOC members thought about golf, would the top players play? We had to convince the top players, if you were an Olympic athlete, if you were named to be on the team, will you in fact play? Because golf we're fortunate to have a number of tentpole events around the year, every year, 4 major championships, the Ryder Cup, President's Cup, Solheim Cup, the Players Championship, etc. So to add one more event into the golf's calendar, there were some people who were saying, is that really something we need in our sport? And fortunately, after 2 stagings in Rio and in Tokyo, I think golf has been now accepted as a really good part of the golf schedule's calendar.
Was there a point where you were nervous about all of this? Like, oh my gosh, is this really going to happen?
Every day. Every day. There was, every conversation was a new conversation to have. They talk about lobbying. You actually literally stand in a lobby in various Olympic hotel venues around the world during various parts of these 18 months. And every conversation was one in which you had to be on point, you had to be on message every time, and say the same thing over and over again, many times to the same person. And ultimately, it came down to that vote in Copenhagen in October, and we were fortunate enough to get it in.
Do you remember that elevator pitch? Any bit of it?
Well, I think it was the top players are going to play. That's going to happen. We think golf has the same values of the Olympic values and Olympism. We think golf would be good for the Olympics. We think Olympics would be good for golf. And it will not. There is no greater global game in the Olympics than golf, and that's going to appeal to a wide swath of your viewership, your Olympic fans, and in countries around the world.
18 months traveling the world. How does one survive that?
Well, it came in spurts. I mean, and they were nice venues to go to over the. I mean, Beijing Olympics was our first trip in August of '08. Copenhagen in October of '09 was nice, and in between those were a lot of different places, whether it was Dubai or whether it was Lausanne, Switzerland. And we had the ability to do it collectively. So it wasn't just me, it was a number of other people. And as I said, Tim Fincham had a lot to say about whether I would be involved in it. And he participated a great deal himself as the commissioner of the PGA Tour, as did all the other leaders of golf organizations that wanted this to happen. And so, yeah, it took some time, and there were some nice plane rides and nice little bit. I was fortunate enough to go to nice locations and speak to a wide variety of people that I never would have had the opportunity to speak with if this happened.
Ty, where does this humility come from that I'm seeing in you? Is it your upbringing, mom, dad? What is it?
Well, I grew up in a small town in Ohio, and Midwestern values maybe, but at the end of the day, I have a high level of confidence in what I do. But at the end of the day, you also have to have the support of a lot of other people. And in order for us to have this happen for golf in the Olympics, that was the case. It was a huge team effort for everybody to get done.
I've heard time and time again, life is a team sport. You agree?
No question. Even though golf is an individual sport, in this case, it was a real team sport.
Yeah. Can we go to Rio 2016? I'm going to take you back there. What was that like for you after all of that work, that time that you put into this? Finally, we're here.
I go back to so when we were in the process of bidding, one of the things that we said in our pitch was one of the great things about golf is that you don't have to build a golf course, because if an Olympic village or if a town was able to hold an Olympic competition, there's probably a golf course in that city that could do an Olympic golf competition. They picked the one city in the world in Rio in 2009. We had 7 years to figure that out, because they did not have a golf course that was capable of hosting an Olympic golf competition for both men and women at the highest levels. So we had to build a golf course, which took a lot and the PGA Tour's design services and construction services golf course business, the leadership of that was contributed to the process. And so we made at least 12 visits from 2010 to 2016 on just the golf course preparations alone. And today, that golf course still exists. It's a public golf course, the only public golf course in the country of Brazil. And it's the only venue that was built for the Rio Games that is still in operation, up and running.
You know, before the camera started to roll, you and I spoke about that, some of your biggest achievements, accomplishments to you, and that was one of them, that golf course.
I think, look, I've been blessed to have a 31-year career in golf. The LPGA, PGA Tour, this activity with the Olympics, but the things that we had to do in order to get a golf course built in Rio, when their economy in 2009 was at its height, and by the time the Olympics came, it was at its lowest levels. And that whole process was one in which, again, you needed a lot of different and talented people to come together. Golf course architect Gil Hance now is probably the most renowned golf course today because of the reputation he got for building this golf course in Rio. But again, the PGA Tour design services, construction services, the trips that we had to take to Rio post the 18 months that we did getting golf into the Olympics in terms of the bid process, which is as satisfying an accomplishment for me as getting golf.
Wow. LPGA, can we talk about your time there? Because you also had a lot of accomplishments during that time, and enjoyable. So you enjoyed your time there.
No question. I started I started my career as a lawyer in Cincinnati, Ohio. Met an individual who was a client of the firm who became a mentor for the rest of my life, still is. He's 92 years old, a guy named Charlie Meacham. He became commissioner of the LPGA in 1991. He was a client of my firm in Cincinnati. When he became commissioner, he asked me to come along with him, and I started at the LPGA in 1991. Fortunate to follow him. There was one person in between us, and follow him as commissioner in 1999, and was commissioner from 99 to 2005. But those 15 years really formed, I think, my it really formed the foundation of my professional life. And the great thing about those 15 years was we woke up everybody who worked for the LPGA woke up every single day knowing that any decision that they made was a consequential decision. Good or bad, you had to do something, and there was the PGA Tour was a great experience as well, and was very satisfying. But the resources that the PGA Tour has in comparison to the resources the LPGA had, we had a much smaller staff. We had to do multiple things, and every day was a consequential decision. And that's really what kind of formed the basis of my philosophy, that the reward for good work is more work. And it's not necessarily a pat on the back. It's not necessarily financial remuneration. It's the best reward for great work is more work.
Say that louder, because that is fact right there. You know, part of Changemakers is to inspire and instill the basis, what you're saying right now, for perhaps younger students who are watching this, right? Because I want you to say it again, because it's fact. That's how it is. That's life.
No question. And I was fortunate enough in my law practice, you didn't get a lot of attaboys and pats on the back. And if you weren't given more work, you kind of knew that you weren't cutting the snuff. And so the reward for good work is more work, is what was instilled in me early on. And that's helped me be a manager of people. That's helped me be a leader of people. And it's formed my own kind of philosophy of life, is that don't necessarily think you're going to get a lot of pats on the back. Just do the work and good things will come from it.
Yeah. I want to talk about this as well, sacrifice, because that's a part of business, right? Of hard work, how you get to whatever you want to get to. So let's talk about that. Some of the sacrifices that you had to do over the years to deal with.
I learned, with my kids growing up, I always talk about delayed gratification. That everybody wants to have gratification right now, and the most satisfying rewards that I have seen in my life is you put the work in, you don't expect a lot of accolades. If they come, great, but the reward is in the work. And in order for you to not have unrealistic expectations as to what you should accomplish or can accomplish, you need to have some level of delayed gratification and a discipline to say, until the good stuff comes, you got to put the time in and the work in to make that happen.
Yeah, yeah. Are your kids like, okay, Dad, we know you're right, but
No. Every time they know those two words, delayed gratification is like code for them to say, all right, I got to get back to work.
Yeah. Ty, I want to talk about what you're looking forward to most, because you say you're almost making a year in retirement, July. Yeah. What are you looking forward to?
Well, it's one, spending more time with my family, spending more time with people who are important to me, doing things for people that are important to me. Charity is certainly something that everybody wants to talk about in retirement, to say get full of, but I've climbed a couple of different mountains in my career, and what I'd like to do now is, and those mountains were mostly about me and about accomplishing things in my career. The next mountain I'd like to kind of scale would be to think about more and talk about more and do things more for other people. And whether that's a charity, or whether that's a phone call to set up a tea time for somebody, or whether that's speaking to a university sports business or law school class, which I've done over the past year 3 or 4 times, that's what I want to try to focus on. I woke up every day in my professional career with a level of anxiety that drove me to make things I mentioned earlier, I had a fear of failure. That's what drove me to have whatever level of success I've had. And now that anxiety has somewhat dissipated because I don't have anything to worry about. And that's a great feeling, but it's also one that's an adjustment for me going forward, so that anxiety drove me. That what will the lack of anxiety do for me going forward? I just have to find another little edge.
Yeah. Pivot a little bit, see what happens. I want to talk briefly about the image of golf. We spoke about this as well. It is considered an elitist sport. Even though there are public golf courses in the U.S., a lot of folks will feel like they have access to them. So let's talk about that.
Well, that was one of the subjects that came up in the process of getting golf in the Olympics. There were a number of IOC members, some of who are members of royal families, which I thought was somewhat ironic that they're asking about elitism in golf when they're they're pretty much the definition of an elitist. But at the same time, if you live in an English-speaking country, if you want to play golf, golf is a fully developed sport in those countries relative to if you want to play, you have access to public golf courses. In other non-English speaking countries, if you want to play, you pretty much have to be part of a private club in order to, and that limits growth, that limits access, that limits a number of things, and that contributes to golf's image. And one of the things that we think golf in the Olympics has done is kind of make it a little bit more of a that image is not necessarily this. In China, for example, golf was seen as a recreational activity, not an athletic endeavor. But as soon as golf became an Olympic sport, overnight in that country, now there were other issues that the government has talked about with respect to golf, but overnight, golf as an Olympic sport had an instant credibility as an athletic endeavor because it was in fact an Olympic sport. And in many countries, the Olympics are the pinnacle of athletic achievement, and so if golf is part of that, then you can now be considered part of that pinnacle process.
What are your hopes for the future of this sport that you love?
I think to bring it to as many people as you can possibly bring it to. I think that golf in the Olympics is one aspect of that, but I think first tee here in this country and in certain chapters around the world, is bringing golf to young people who wouldn't otherwise necessarily be exposed to that sport. The values of our sport are great in terms of sportsmanship, respect, integrity, calling penalties on yourself, as opposed to in other sports, if you're not cheating, you're not trying. In golf, the integrity of our sport is such that you call your own penalties, you referee yourself, and that is unlike any other sport, which I think needs to be that needs to get spread around to a much greater degree than and I think everybody who is inside of our sport wants that to happen, because we're drawn to it in a way that we know what the values are. We just need to get them out to everybody else.
As a former athlete, let me go on the record as saying I do not agree with if you don't cheat, you're not trying, okay?
There's
okay, let's take that out. I don't like
But there are certain sports where you'll agree that.
Well, yeah, there are certain ones.
That's why they're holding penalties in football.
We briefly went over this because you went into the golf course, so I couldn't really talk about this. But I want to get you back to 2016 Rio Olympics. It's finally there. It's finally happening. You're in the stands watching this happen. Maybe I don't even know where you were, but tell me about that as well. Take us back to the experience. Relive it.
Well, the venue was sold out every day. This is the men's competition. The women's competition was just as successful the following week. But we're on the 18th. There's a viewing area on the 18th green. We're coming down the stretch. It's Justin Rose against Henrik Stenson, against Matt Kuchar, gold, silver, bronze. And it comes down to Justin Rose has a chip on the 18th hole. If he gets it close and can make par, he wins gold. And so when the final putt dropped, I had two gentlemen who worked their butts off to get the golf course built. Two guys from the PGA Tour Construction Services. And when the putt dropped and we had a gold medal winner and a silver and a bronze established, all the work that went into building that golf course from 2010 to 2016, and there was still wet paint on the golf course on the day of the opening ceremony. That was a very satisfying experience, and I turned around to the two gentlemen, and we all had tears in our eyes. It was really one of those things where all that hard work, all that delayed gratification, finally came to fruition.
That's what I want to know. Did you cry? I don't think so.
We did, yes. And the gentleman that worked most closely with me getting golf in the Olympics was Peter Dawson, who was the CEO of the R&A, the UK that runs the Open Championship and runs golf outside of the United States. In terms of the administration of rules, Peter was the CEO of the R&A, and he and I were kind of co-partners in this whole process. And he's a very stiff upper lip kind of Brit guy, and the fact that we both embraced and had tears in our eyes at the end of that process was very gratifying as well.